Yesterday was truly a historic occasion. It was the first budget that was announced outside of this House. It was also the largest budget in the history of the state. But it was also a missed opportunity, Taoiseach, to make the most of a crisis. We've often heard that phrase used, and use the amount of funding that you had to transform Ireland. You've borrowed a huge amount of money, but for real people watching this now, change isn't huge for them. I welcome many aspects of your budget. I've said so publicly. I will not engage, like, dare I say it, some others, in being all negative. There are aspects here in relation to businesses which I really do welcome. I also welcome some ring-fence funding for some groups, particularly those with disabilities, who I've spoken about quite a bit inside here, as you know. But for ordinary people, I'm not sure this is going to have any real impact in their lives. In fact, it could be very regressive. This time last year, the biggest worry we faced was the threat of a no-deal Brexit, a threat which still hangs over us. But COVID has been a major disruptor, and being a disruptor can actually have a positive impact as well. Things that were unthinkable last year have become a reality this year. We've all heard the harrowing stories of loved ones lost and livelihoods that have changed and people who are struggling. And the pandemic has exposed for all of us aspects of Ireland that were hidden underneath the carpet and out of sight. As my colleague Jed Nash has laid out so incisively, the pandemic has proved beyond doubt that Ireland is a country with a two-tier health service inside a two-tier economy. Everybody has known for decades about our two-tier health service, how people are being treated based on their income and not based on their medical need. And all of us here know the impact that this has had on people's lives, how people are forced to wait for treatment for years with their loved ones anxiously hoping for a positive outcome. Labour has been campaigning for years for this wrong to be addressed, and we are now calling for a new social contract in Ireland. And Taoiseach, I really would encourage you to look at this. We have an opportunity to change Ireland. You have an opportunity to change Ireland. In the middle of this global pandemic, yesterday's massive stimulus budget was the greatest chance any Irish government has ever had to finally move towards a universal public single-tier health system, to finally do what Dr. Noel Browne tried to do 70 years ago and create an Irish national health service. And the question is, what did the government do yesterday? Did the government take the radical steps needed as we face the most challenging winter that our health system has ever faced? The answer obviously is they did not, and the consequences for people who have suffered because of this state of affairs are serious and potentially long-term. Patients who cannot be seen to because they are on waiting lists. Health workers who are stressed beyond breaking point while doing their utmost to service the public. They all have been let down, I believe, by this budget. They don't need any more applause or kind words. They need safe staffing. They need resources. The collective mental health of our health workers cannot afford to be sold a pup now when it comes to increasing staff numbers. And I listened to the Minister for Health today in his press conference. And I just want to say this, he has to deliver. The government has claimed it will deliver an additional 1,146 acute beds and hire an additional 16,000 staff next year. Taoiseach, you know I'm going to monitor this month by month. 12,500 of those have to be in by April. That's a commitment that's been given in this House there by the Minister for Health. Will that be done? So that's 3,500 from April to December. 12,500, 8,500 very soon. Remember those figures, because I think people are hoping they'll be lost. They will not be lost. I'll remind them all the time. I doubt they're achievable. The best example we have of the health system dealing with large numbers of new recruits recently was the Be On Call for Ireland. We all know where that ended up. When it comes to ICU beds, the government says it will increase the numbers from around 280 at the moment to 321 by the end of 2021. Real issue here for me, Taoiseach, is we know we're just at about 53% of our total requirement of ICU beds. So we basically have to double them. We needed to be using the last few months to do that. We're not going to deliver. And if we get to a very bad place, like the way the North is going to struggle over the next few weeks, then we should have been using that time. Or else we should bite the bullet and do what the Labour Party proposed, which would help, wouldn't be a panacea, which is to buy private capacity hospitals outright. Instead of throwing bad money after good, instead of renting them, just buy them. Trust me, they're available. Also, this amount of money being set aside in relation to new consultants simply doesn't add up. I've done the figures. I've listened to the Minister today. I gave him a chance to explain it. No minister in the history of Ireland has ever made so many commitments to consultants. I keep reminding him of it. I'd love to see him deliver it, but I can't see it based on these figures. In relation to the 1,250 community care beds, they are welcome. I very much do welcome them. But as you know, I have a deep concern as to how these can be delivered on time and have the staffing in place. And also in relation to non-COVID healthcare, Minister. By the way, I'm still waiting for those figures 3 weeks later in relation to comparisons with last year and this year. If we cannot deliver the figures, the beds and the staffing that has been outlined in this budget, well then we're going to have a very difficult conversations in relation to how we prioritise people over the coming months. I welcome what has been provided in mental health and in disabilities. I have a real issue in relation to the provision for disabilities. I've spoken an awful lot about Section 38 and Section 39. My God, that money needs to be targeted. And I'm not saying that's all government's fault. I think you know what I'm saying. It needs to be targeted. It needs to be targeted. I met with many people again this week in relation to that. And one last thing, and this is within your gift, Taoiseach, when it comes to healthcare. There's a man watching tonight. His name is John Wall. I know others know him. I dare I say he's a friend of mine at this stage after a number of years. He's from Ennis, he's from Clare. He's terminally ill. You know who he is. It's downright mean, the fact that commitments were made by your health minister in Fianna Fáil's election manifesto, a programme for government. And do you know what? 600,000 would deal with this. Because many of the people who are terminally ill actually are getting cards anyway, so this is to deal with the rest of them. I'm asking you, in fact I'm imploring you, please sort this out. People who are terminally ill, there's nobody in Ireland, I'd say, there's certainly not anyone in this House that would dispute the fact that they deserve not to be worrying about medical cards and medical bills. And it's the one small ask I would make of you on the floor of the Dáil today. I spoke to him last night. He's very upset. And it's not just questions in relation to health. I have real issues in relation to the housing figures as well. I respect the ambition of what is being put out there. I'm just not sure, in reality, and I listened to what Minister Varadkar said earlier on this morning, if these are deliverable. I don't believe they're deliverable in 2021. I also have to say that I think the Help to Buy scheme is a farce. It's actually acting as an incentive to drive up prices and facilitate the speculation in developers. All anecdotal evidence, all statistical evidence shows that. So that is not going to be a success. It's clear to anybody who studied the detail of yesterday's budget, Taoiseach, that I feel that both yourselves and the Greens were quite passive when it came to the actual deliverance of the budget, because it comes across to me as very much Fine Gael orientated. There's a long list of commitments there in relation to businesses, but very little for workers. We know about the PUP not being restored. We know about the fact that there is a whole range of tax breaks still being left in there, but there's very little for actual workers. There's very little for people to see that they're going to be able to maintain their incomes. The fact that you couldn't deal with the actual minimum wage and only take the recommendation in relation to 10 cents, for me, is unacceptable, and for many people it is unacceptable. Because what we have in Ireland is not just a two-tier health system, we also have a two-tier economy. It's no longer a dispute. Every economic indicator, from the Central Bank to the Department of Finance's own projections, paints a picture of two radically different economies in our republic now, and two radically different experiences for people in those economies. The first economy, which is centred on the multinational sector, and particularly pharmaceuticals, IT, and I, unlike others, welcome this, is thankfully thriving. I support it. But in fact, in such a growth in this sector, with its many well-paying jobs, that in spite of the shutdown of many parts of the economy this year, GDP is only expected to decline by somewhere between 0.4 and 2.5. That is phenomenally small contracting, considering everything that has happened. But that doesn't tell the full story, because the second economy, the domestic economy, is on its knees, with the Central Bank estimating that domestic demand will fall by at least 7.1% this year. The bottom line is that the official numbers are now indisputable and are showing something which the Labour Party has been highlighting for many years. Official Ireland is now finally at long last waking up to the fact that we have a two-tier economy in this country. One economy for the well-paid, the comfortable and the well-connected, and another economy for the low-paid workers, struggling families, young families and stressed-out citizens. One economy has been relatively well insulated from the effects of the pandemic, while the other has not. Is it any wonder that we have a two-tier health system when it sits on top of a two-tier economy? It doesn't take a genius to work out which tier of the health service that lower-paid workers and lower-income families are most likely to have to use. And it doesn't take a genius to work out which one of those two, based in either side of that breakdown, are suffering the most during COVID. It's always the poor. The stats show all of this. We had an opportunity, I believe, Taoiseach, in this budget to use the disruptor of COVID in a positive way, to deal with the issue of childcare. We have a fascinating situation in this country whereby the owners of the privatised childcare, in the main privatised childcare system in our country, are not very happy. Those parents who have to use the service are not very happy. Those workers who went to college for years and have third-level degrees and are being paid under €12 an hour are not very happy. You had a capacity this time around to actually begin the process of reform and dealing with that. And it's a golden opportunity gone out the window. We have to invest. We have to invest in our children. We have to invest in our childcare provision. And it's gone. This was that opportunity to act as a disruptor. And I also ask you, when it comes to families out there, you take any family across this country where there's a couple possibly working in retail, where they have young children, you ask yourselves, what does this budget do for them? Will they be able to potentially buy a house after this? No. Will their childcare costs in any way go down? No. Will their incomes in any way be higher? No. In fact, for that couple with one child or a couple of children, this is actually a regressive budget. You needn't bother shaking your head. Do out the stats. Do it out. Do it out. Okay, well, put it out on a page. Put it out on a page and show me how they are better off. That young couple with one or two children, living in Dublin, working in low-paid jobs, potentially in retail or something similar, how in the name of God can they be better off? And don't start this crack of being thankful for having jobs, because that's not acceptable to me. And I think that's why this budget is a missed opportunity. There are some very good things here, Ceann Comhairle, some things I would support in relation to business opportunities and supports for businesses. Previously I come from working in Fáilte, Ireland. I appreciate that industry. and how difficult it is. By the way, the 10 million for Cork Airport and Shannon Airport is pittance, considering Shannon Airport's losing 1.3 million a week in revenue. But I support the measures in general. However, for real people watching it, for the old age pensioner living in a council house in Oireachtas, bringing in a bag of coal in the evening, they're worried today. For the young couple with kids who are trying to get on in life, there is no change. In fact, this is regressive. And that's why, despite the scale of this budget, Taoiseach, the impact on real people, working people, people who have to try and make ends meet, this is a regressive budget. It is not proportionate and it is not fair. And that is an indictment on where your priorities are in the biggest pandemic we've seen in this country in over 100 years.